structural. I think what we have right now is, if you look at the world, not just Nigeria, the US is dealing with high inflation everywhere. Even Europe, right? There is an inflation problem, and if you and that's actually been driven by the fact that there was massive hits to logistics last year, right? The ability to move goods freely. COVID has had a massive impact on things. So inflation is probably something that we might probably deal with, or that would probably be around for the next 2 years, or depends on how obviously COVID has keeps coming and giving us a blow in the jaw. Depends on how that evolves, or so it's really unclear um, how to manage that process or how to manage that. So I can't tell you that it is. I mean, obviously we have our own Nigerian issues. What I'm saying is, globally, this is a problem for every economy.
Great stuff. And for those who are if you're just clicking on our YouTube, unfortunately, our YouTube is just starting now. Just so that nobody's lost, we're talking to Dele Akintola, Head Sub-Saharan Africa Equity Sales for Stanbic IBTC. And we've been talking about inflation in Nigeria, still at high elevated levels, and how to get that down. Dele also touched on quickly on other topics around MTN Nigeria, the share offer, 5G auction, and so on and so forth. I want to quickly get your take on what we've seen so far this week.
I mean, we've been a part of the process for MTN public offer. That closed. The retail leg closed on Tuesday. We had obviously the institutional offer, which also closed about 2 weeks ago. We show a good showing from institutional money. But clearly, the transaction is such that they're trying to push retail. So obviously, I think, from where I sit, I think an ideal thing or ideal close would be MTN seeing 2 million new investors, retail investors, subscribing to the transaction, and obviously taking a sizable portion of the transaction size. So there's a green shoe of 15%, which would mean that the transaction can be as sizable as 115 billion. So I think we don't have the outcome yet of how much has been collected from a retail perspective, but I do expect that the transaction should be 100% subscribed, which is a massive success. So if you look at the history of transactions that MTN Group has done across Africa, be it in Ghana, in Uganda, the execution rate or the success rate of such transactions have actually not been 100%. So Nigeria might actually be an outlier in this instance of actually achieving 100% subscription on the transaction. And I guess, furthermore, when you think of the announcement around the 5G licenses, MTN is getting that. Another player who's a non-operator who's also gotten the license, where Airtel had to fall off. But that's obviously tells you that MTN would get that first mover advantage in terms of deploying 5G going to the future. And clearly with the PSB license as well, I think that if you ever thought of a company that was at the heart and mind of the nation, in the pockets of every Nigerian, and we're talking about 75 million subscribers here, there was no other company on the Nigerian Stock Exchange that gives you that kind of exposure into the story of Nigeria. So MTN is in your pocket. So for every 2 out of 5 phones in this country, you're right, it's using an MTN network. So I think it's a stock to own.
Are you also, if we just ask MTN, I think there's only one other publicly traded telco, I believe, on the exchange. Generally, are you bullish on telecoms in Nigeria, though?
I am bullish on the entire sector. And I think that, and that's really driven by the demographic of the country. I find that, look at me and you now, many months ago, I would be driving into your office to have this conversation. Now we're doing this virtually, and I imagine that I wouldn't be coming to your office again to do this, in person. I probably do it virtually. But while we're here, we're using mobile networks, we're using mobile data, So data is the future, and people, you see that the world is talking about NFTs and virtual land, and and these are the kind of things that the generation of today will be interested in, and these things will be driven by data, and by the use of data and networks. So totally bullish on the industry, on that sector, and I think that we have what it takes to drive growth.
Great stuff. Only about a minute to go. The market, equities market did over 50% last year. You just mentioned only up about 5%. Well, what's your take on the market? I guess, is it still?
I mean, 50% last year was obviously, the interest rates last year dropped to about 2%. T-bills were at 2%, right? We haven't had that similar reaction this year. Or actually, hopefully not. But equities have just sort of, I think for most people, a lot of companies have actually done very well in spite of COVID. You've seen growth. If you look at the Dangote Cement and MTNs and all of that, and even the FMCG, they've actually done well. So I think for most local investors, the question is, why am I selling this position, right? On the international side, clearly there's still a queue. What we've seen is people are switching out of mostly out of banks and moving into other names just to, depending when they can get the money out of Nigeria, looking for solid stocks to play or just to sit in, so they can exit. But yeah, so I don't expect that much to change between now and the end of the year. So the outlook is not extremely bullish, but I'm happy that we're not seeing a total collapse of confidence in the equity market. So so we hang on and we keep pushing. I keep moving forward.
It's always great to have you, man. Always. I always appreciate having you on the show. We've come to the end of the show, but Dele Akintola, once again, Head Sub-Saharan Africa Equity Sales, Stanbic IBTC. Thanks so much for your insights today. Appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you, Rotus. Always a pleasure. Speak soon.
All right. Rotus, Dele, thank you guys for joining the show as well. Lagos, there's more to come. Don't forget, this is Smooth 98.1, so please stay with us.
Thanks, man.